Welcome everybody to this webinar organized by the Joukowsky Institute for Archaeology and the Ancient World. My name is Peter van Dommelen, and as the director of the Joukowsky Institute, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual session about applying to grad school in archaeology, organized by the Joukowsky Institute and with a panel made up of faculty and grad students of the Joukowsky Institute. We'll be discussing with you, answering your questions about how applying not just to archaeology graduate programs, but specifically here at the Joukowsky Institute. We will begin by introducing ourselves, and I will first do so saying, as I said, my name is Peter van Dommelen, and I'm an archaeologist working in the Western Mediterranean between late prehistory and the sort of early classical up to the Roman period. Involved in fieldwork, mostly on the island of Sardinia. My own background, when it comes to applying to grad school and all that, I studied, my grad school was in the Netherlands at the University of Leiden, where I attended an archaeology program. I've been at Brown here for the last 10 years and as a faculty member, and have been involved over those 10 years in both admitting and advising graduate students. Candace, over to you for.
Hello and welcome. I'm Candace Rice. I'm a Roman archaeologist primarily, working on trade and the economy. I'm very interested in regional economic development around the Mediterranean. I am primarily working excavation-wise in Italy. I direct an excavation about an hour north of Rome. And I'm working on starting up a new project in Sicily. So I did my undergraduate in the US, but then I did graduate school in the UK. I did a master's and a doctorate at the University of Oxford. And I've worked at universities in Scotland and Canada, and this is my third year at Brown. Yannis?
Hi, everybody. My name is Yannis Hamilakis. I'm an archaeologist of the Eastern Mediterranean, of Greece in particular. So I work on Greek prehistory, the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, but I also work on more contemporary matters, on the use and reception of archaeology in antiquity in modern times, and also on matters such as archaeology and politics, and contemporary migration as an archaeological issue, as a kind of an archaeological endeavor. I joined Brown 5 years ago. Before that, I was at universities in England and Wales for 20 years. I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Crete in Greece, and I did my graduate studies, master's and PhD at the University of Sheffield in England.
Hello, everybody. I'm Aaron Bentley. I am a third year, PhD student here at Brown. I am actually, I want to say officially a Romanist, though my research interest and studies kind of span several continents and several genres. But I'm mainly interested in intercultural exchange and in cross-cultural interactions, interested in frontier studies, and then also beyond and focusing on the Roman period in Central Europe, and then also wherever there are frontiers. But I'm also interested in museum studies in terms of museology, exhibition design and development, and outreach programs. So I actually got my undergraduate degree at Harvard University in archaeology, and then I kind of took a bit of a turn and studied art history and museum studies at Tufts University. That's where I got my master's. And so now I am here at Brown, and as I said before, this is my third year. And so I've done research and excavations in places from Romania, looking at Daco-Roman villas, to Gallo-Roman fish weirs in the north of France, and then also studying excavations here in the New England area at places like Harvard University and then also at College Hill.
My name is Liza Davis. I'm also a graduate student here. I'm also a third-year PhD student. My research interests focus on interactions between religious communities and expressions of religious identity in the late antique Eastern Mediterranean. I've primarily done field work in the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece and Turkey mostly. And my path to Brown, so I did my undergraduate at Carleton College, a small liberal arts college in Minnesota, and I actually studied geology. And then I did a master's degree in Mediterranean archaeology at University College London over in the UK, and took a couple years off and then came to Brown. So that's how I got here.
With these introductions, we can get started. The way how we've organized this hour, of which now 7 minutes have gone, is that we have already a lot of questions received from you through the registration. And we've set up 3 broad topics to kind of structure this time. The first one is thinking about grad school, where to apply, what place, what department. The second one is how to prepare for grad school, what classes would I take, fieldwork, languages, that sort of thing. And the final one, how to apply, the real application process itself, issues like statements, references, contacting faculty, and all those sort of things. To guide us through that, that's what Liza and Aaron will be doing. They have looked carefully at the questions that you've asked before. And you are all have the possibility to pose new questions in the Q&A. Aaron and Liza will keep an eye on those, and they will take those questions, combine them if useful, and also sort of all attendants can vote up questions so that they get sort of propelled to the top of the list. Aaron and Liza will then ask the questions to us, and we'll really just have a conversation between all 5 of us about those questions. So that's enough introduction and welcoming on my behalf. We'll now have Candace, who will say a few words about the sort of the outlines and structure of our graduate program, and then we'll get going with the questions.
All right, so I'm going to just very, very briefly summarize the structure of our graduate program as it stands now. And I'm sure that many of you are in different stages of thinking about applying. So if you have more detailed questions, want us to elaborate on anything specific, please do ask. So one of the particularly important things to note right up front is that anyone we accept receives a full 6 years of funding. And so that comes with admission. You will spend the first 3 years here in coursework, taking first 4 classes a semester and 3. And during this time, you will also do your exams, which are a series of field exams in different fields like Mediterranean prehistory, Greek, Roman, Near Eastern, Egyptian archaeology. And the breadth of this gives you an indication of the kinds of coursework you're going to be taking in both languages and archaeology topics. And so you will take coursework across both within the Institute and in our neighboring disciplines. So these 3 years are really designed to help you build your interest both more deeply and broadly as well. And from those 3 years of coursework, you will build up to a dissertation topic. And you will have the support and consultation of the full faculty at the Joukowsky as you do that. So it's a very brief sketch of what we do. So again, please feel free to ask questions about the specifics, but I will stop there so as not to take up too much time. And there are lots of details on our website as well. All right, shall we begin with some questions?
I can jump in and ask the first question. I think it sort of follows naturally from what you were just talking about. So a question that we got is basically why Brown, why the Joukowsky Institute? What makes our archaeology PhD program different or stand out from other PhD programs in archaeology? And maybe either Candace or Peter, if you want to take that one.
Candace, do you want to begin?
Sure, I can start with that. I think this is also a very good time to hear from you, Liza, and you, Aaron, as well. So I think what really makes the Joukowsky stand out is our focus on archaeology. As many of you will be familiar, archaeology often gets put in various places under different umbrellas. So whether that's classics or Near Eastern studies or anthropology. And as you will know, our faculty here within the Institute have very diverse interests that are united really under archaeology. And that's a really exciting, that is for me one of the things that makes the Joukowsky really an exciting place to be.
Then I can just chime in. What I really enjoyed about the Joukowsky Institute was the fact that it is so interdisciplinary, because when I was coming in, or basically throughout all of my research, I was very undecided about what I wanted to do or what area I wanted to focus in. And just being able to not be immediately pigeonholed into like a topic or a research area, but being able to interact with people from different research genres, different interests, different time periods, different geographical locations really helped me.
I would echo that as well, Aaron. I think a lot of people come into the Joukowsky Institute with very interdisciplinary interests in archaeology. We have a lot of people doing more GIS and landscape level studies. We have people looking at very diverse time periods, very diverse geographic areas. And so for me, that was a big draw to apply to the Joukowsky Institute specifically, was that there is this sort of wide focus and spirit of interdisciplinary collaboration. And I mean, an expectation that you're going to sort of have these broad, wide-ranging interests.
I think that actually was the key word for me when I looked at the program, was interdisciplinary. And I was like, yes, I need to, if not go here, see more about what this is about. And I think also, Candace and Peter, you may be able to chime in a bit more about this. There is the open grad program, or Yeah,
that's the interdisciplinarity element that you've been emphasizing, but I would sort of, I'll be happy to say more, or perhaps Yannis or Candace, but what I would like to sort of on the first question to say is that, there's many programs in the US that, many more that have faculty working on archaeology in the Mediterranean, but most of those are really within a classical context, and really what those programs do is more sort of narrowly focused on classical archaeology, while classical archaeology is part of what we do here. It's really sort of way much broader, well beyond that, and it's truly sort of a Mediterranean-wide archaeology from early periods, as Yannis was saying, sort of up to recent ones. So it doesn't exclude classical archaeology, but it is really sort of within this much broader context.
So Yannis, how do you? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Yannis, how do you feel about the interdisciplinary aspects of Joukowsky?
Well, I think you've covered most of the important points here. I want to emphasize one more that hasn't been covered yet, and that's that in addition to us all being engaged with fieldwork and with analysis of archaeological material, we also emphasize theory, emphasize ideas and intellectual frameworks. And that's very important because, as some of you know, archaeology did have a long tradition of being a very empirical discipline. And I think that our program tries to combine empirical work with very vibrant and very diverse framework of ideas and theory, not just empirical work in the field.
Yeah, that's great. So also, now we've been talking about how interdisciplinary there is and how many different divisions or departments there are. There's classics, there's anthropology, there's archaeology, art history even. So Yannis, just to call you out one more time, can you talk about the different types of programs and maybe how to decide which ones you should focus on, or how to decide?
Well, a lot depends really on people's interest. I mean, as you know, decision to go to graduate school is a very big decision in your life. It changes, shapes your future in many ways. So it is important to to think and reflect really hard and seriously on what is you want to do, and not only having fun in 6 years, 6 or 7 years, and trying to get some exciting things developing in terms of ideas and projects, but also how these can fit into your broader project for life. So I would say that the decision should be based on individual interests, and also on whether not only the institute and the department, but also the broad university is the university for you. Because let's remember that we are not really an independent institute in the middle of nowhere. We're situated within a university with a specific profile, with lots of other things happening that feed into our archaeological education. So in anthropology, as you say, in art history, in classics, in studies, for the humanities, in the anthropology museum, there are exciting things happening in terms of projects, in terms of talks or conferences, and all these feed into the broader graduate education. So it is important for people to look not only at what we do as faculty or as institute, but also in what's happening outside the institute within the university at Brown. So just a few thoughts on the decision, and of course, getting advice and asking us, but also perhaps other people who have been here, what was their experience? Asking somebody maybe independent is always a good idea, because we are all situated and we all, we're biased in many ways here. But ask others who have been, and they can tell you both the positive things and perhaps the things that were not very positive, for them to actually then make a decision in your final kind of application process.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, just to continue with the different aspects of the programs and actually Joukowsky as a whole, we do have a question from the chat asking about, I guess, my interest in terms of museology, museums in the area, and the Center for Public Humanities. So there is actually, in addition to being able to take different courses at Brown and then even take different courses with institutions that are kind of affiliated with Brown, which is amazing. We also do have the Center for Public Humanities, and you could actually get a certificate. You can sign up for the certificate program. And there you have additional courses that you can take, like Introduction to Public Humanities or Digital Humanities. And then I think also that Museum Studies track also entails a museum internship. Actually, one of the members of our cohort, Amina, is actually on that track as well. So I can contact her and then she could maybe field in some additional answers.
Can I also get back to, I realized you speaking, left one question hanging, Aaron, about the open graduate education. Sorry for that. Because I think, as you've, Yannis and Aaron, has just been emphasizing, all these other, neighboring and affiliated departments, there's quite a bit of exchange also, not just students going to other departments, but also faculty going to others. But it's also something, this interdisciplinarity, that Brown itself very much emphasizes and encourages, and they've actually have this specific program, the Open Graduate Education program, which enables graduate students to take a master degree in addition to their PhD in a different discipline. So we've had in the Joukowsky Institute archaeology graduate students who have been doing masters in geology, earth sciences, computing science. Liza, you're actually in there, religious studies, and so you should actually say a little bit more on the student perspective, how that looks.
Sure, yeah, so the Open Graduate Program, like Peter said, enables you to get a master's degree in a secondary field that complements your primary field of study, which obviously in my case is archaeology. So because I'm so interested in the interactions between religious communities in the ancient Mediterranean, it was really a natural fit for me to pursue this religious studies master's. It will allow me to get a more in-depth understanding of the field of religious studies, become more familiar with the sort of methods and major theories of that subfield, and just allow me to become a lot more conversant with this other discipline. And in addition, it also kind of gives you another institutional home here, and it broadens your connections with other faculty members and graduate students. So this is definitely a program to keep in mind if like many of us, you're interested in these very kind of interdisciplinary opportunities here at Brown.
Can I just add something that brings the whole discussion back to the Institute? Because at the end, you'll be spending most of your time doing things within the Institute, interacting with people. Another good strategy to follow before applying, before deciding, is actually get to know our research a bit more. So try and find some of our publications or outputs that are listed on the university website or on open platforms such as Academia.edu or ResearchGate, and read a bit from each and every faculty member or research student sometimes, because that will give you a sense of the kind of direction our research take, the kind of ideas that we are developing through our archaeological work, and then you decide whether some of these ideas are really exciting for you and you want to work with and follow further and develop your own. So there is a lot out there, open access, easily found online. So please do, check us out, Google us, Google us, academically, and find out what we've actually been up to for the last few years.
Now, another question regarding the different types of programs. We've hyped up how awesome Joukowsky is in the United States front, but what about Joukowsky versus, maybe I should just say, applying to graduate programs here in the US as opposed to applying to graduate programs abroad? And so maybe Candace, since you've been a world traveler, well, all of you have been world travelers, but starting off with Candace, could you tell us the differences in terms of like the programs?
Well, I think as I was saying with my very brief summary of the graduate program, the funding is a really big difference. So you are rarely guaranteed funding for graduate studies in places like the UK, and that is not the case here. So when we accept you, you are fully funded, and you're fully funded for 6 years, and that really gives you the time to delve in and explore what you're looking for. In terms of timing, 6 years does seem like a long time, and particularly when you think just about, say, a 3-year degree somewhere like the UK, which is what I'm particularly familiar with. But in a way, it's not as different as you think. If you think of it as a master's plus a PhD, those can be considered 2 different degrees in some places, but they're the same program here. So you don't actually do a separate master's as part of your Joukowsky program. So while you can do something like the OGE and get one on the side, it's not a part of the actual PhD program here. It's all built in together. Yannis, would you like to add to that?
It's a very good question, and actually the differences are significant. Let's say if we compare a program here and the program in Europe, let's say in Britain, that all of us have experience in. And I think one of the main differences, in addition to what Candace says, is that here you get a broad graduate level education that gives you a very comprehensive understanding of many facets of archaeology. And if you feel that you need that, given the very broad nature of degrees, let's say in the US, I think it's important to go into graduate school here. If you feel that you've already got that and you're already prepared to start a project, a specific project for your PhD dissertation, then you can apply to a program in the UK or another European country, for example, because in this context, the program is more geared towards people who have already decided, and they go into graduate school with a prospectus, basically, with a title and a topic and a dissertation supervisor in mind. Whereas, as we've all said here, you need to acquire that very comprehensive and broad education before you embark on writing on a doctoral dissertation topic.
Great, thank you, Yannis and Candace. So just in the interest of time, I think we're going to move on to our second kind of broad theme for this webinar, which is essentially how to prepare for graduate study and, I guess, how to make yourself a competitive candidate for a PhD program in archaeology. So we're getting some questions in the chat, as well as some questions that we had submitted earlier, kind of about coursework and how to best prepare for undertaking a PhD level study. Is a master's degree required? Is a master's degree recommended? What kind of coursework would you recommend for a student wanting to apply to our program or other archaeology programs? Maybe Peter, do you want to field this one? You're muted also.
Oh, sorry about that. I can actually begin sort of very quickly with one of the last points you mentioned, which I see is one of the questions in the Q&A about if you enter PhD with an MA. Yes, if you come into the program with an MA or directly out of your undergraduate, the program is exactly the same. There's no exemptions with whatever kind of experience or degree you go in. Everybody starts at the same point and does the same things. Well, not the same classes, of course, but sort of the same program. Sort of more generally about classes. Yeah, it's archaeology classes or relevant for your region. I think we're pretty broad in terms of preparation. It depends sort of on your interests, where you want to go to, what's relevant. But most of all, we are also very well aware that the kind of courses at undergraduate level that are on offer throughout the US, but also elsewhere in Europe or other parts of the world, are differ very, very widely. And it may just be the case that you're studying at a place where you just cannot have that sequence of classes on, say, Roman, Phoenician, even prehistory, what have you, of the Mediterranean. They're specialized. That may have been just only New World archaeology that's offered at your place, and that is not a problem in principle. It's perhaps not ideal, but it's definitely not a problem. And I think not having taken Mediterranean archaeology classes should not be something that stops you from applying, but it is something you want to flag up, be open about, not try and hide it. That's never a good idea. But it is something you could. But it's still worth getting in touch, and it depends what you want and where you want to go.
Great, and sort of following up from that theme, we talk a bit about languages, both in terms of preparing to undertake graduate level work, which often requires languages. So should students who are perhaps doing their undergrads right now think about completing some languages, getting some languages under their belt? I know if Peter, you want to.
Well, I can. So I'll begin to say a few words. I think the main point to sort of say here is that languages are not a formal requirement for admission to the program. That's the sort of key point. The key point: languages are part of the graduate program itself. And languages, to be specific, is 2 ancient ones in principle and 2 modern ones. But we're flexible on that. These sort of depending whether you sort of do prehistoric or more recent periods, that there may be a different mix. Which languages you do they need to be relevant to your interests. But of course, 4 languages is a lot. And if you have to start from scratch on all those languages, that is a serious workload. So having some language, whether it's modern one or ancient ones, it would be helpful, but it's definitely not an impediment to apply, and it's certainly not a formal requirement.
I just want to chime in there. There are different ways to pass the language requirements. You do have to take like a formal translation exam for 3 of them, or you can come in with a language, pass the translation exams for 3 of them. But one of them you could actually course out by taking like an upper level or an intermediate level course in that language. And so to move on to another question, and I want to pass it off to Candace, as we had a previous discussion about this, the importance of fieldwork in preparation for an archaeological application, because I know we had questions with other undergraduates. worried about the pandemic and asking even, we can't do field work. Are we even archaeologists now? And you had something very poignant to say.
Well, I think I will stress, we haven't been doing field work. You are not the only ones. And it is something that we will very much keep in mind. There are probably a handful of people who have managed to do some degree of fieldwork over the past 2 summers, but they're going to be in the minority. And so you should not feel in any way, shape, or form that this is going to be counted against you. And this is something that we've been encouraging our own graduate students to do. So think about the other things that you need as an archaeologist, like languages. And there are certainly other things that people have been doing and that people have needed to do. So fieldwork is important. And if you have experience, certainly do talk about it. But we are all very mindful that the past few years have been incredibly difficult. And that's on top of the simple financial difficulties and practicalities that get in the way of fieldwork already without a pandemic on top of that. So.
Yeah, if I may add to that, sort of fieldwork is an important aspect of, well, say, academic life here at the Joukowsky Institute. Perhaps I can say sort of all faculty and all students are involved in fieldwork, normally speaking, pandemic permitting. But we also are aware, particularly when it comes when you're an undergraduate, you're at different places, different institutions, it may not be so easy to do field work. So field schools can be tend to be prohibitively expensive. And there may be personal situations that make it really hard for you to actually go away on fieldwork for a long period. So alternative experiences, lab work, museum work on collections, they're definitely aspects of practical work that we very much appreciate as well. Even so, fieldwork remains kind of important, but that's why the 6 years when you're here, they come to play in that as well. And it's sort of the same as with languages. Fieldwork is not a formal requirement. It's not that if we see an application, there's no fieldwork on it, and we say, oh, that one goes in the bin. That's definitely not the case. That's just being considered just as anything. But if you haven't been able to do that, be clear why it wasn't possible and what you've been doing to the best of your abilities and situation instead.
Great, thank you. So I have a broad question, and maybe Yannis, you could take this one first. So essentially, we've had a couple questions along the lines of what do you as faculty look for in prospective students to the program? We had a question that's sort of, what are some valuable undergraduate experiences or sort of pre-application experiences that applicants can have or undertake before they would apply to our program that would make them standout applicants to you?
Yeah, that's not an easy one to answer because there is no standard checklist that we have in front of us and go down and check boxes. That's not how it works. So we work on we look on the broader profile of the person, not only in terms of their undergraduate career, obviously, and the things, the courses they have done and the interest as well, but also on their broader kind of experience that relates, as we said just now, to participation when possible in fieldwork of a different kind. And I think that last point that Peter raised is important. So don't have in mind only excavation. Try and broaden it to understand that your experience with collections, with museums, with ethnographic groups and contexts is also important. So all these things that show participation in contexts that relate in some way to research. Now, by that, I don't mean that you should be already researchers. No, you're trained to be researchers in graduate school. But participation in research context is something that shows keenness and appetite and willingness to learn in those diverse environments. And then the other, I guess, key point for us in your statement, to see enthusiasm about the things you want to study, to see that you're really into it because of various kind of, interest, experiences, or ideas you have had both in academia or in research, in education and life in general, that make you a passionate person. Right? So we want to see passionate people who want to spend, because let's face it, it's a long slog. It's like actually, 6 or 7 years of your life. And sometimes there are ups and downs. And sometimes there are things that frustrate you, as frustrate us as well. So it is important to see that we're actually having people who have the passion and the drive to keep them going, whatever, over the 6 or 7 years of your graduate school career.
Great, thank you, Yannis. Just a very kind of technical question that we've gotten as well regarding English proficiency. Sort of what degree of English proficiency is needed for graduate work? Is there a requirement on the English proficiency test that you look for? Maybe Peter, do you want to take that?
Yes, I can. I remember to unmute. There is a university-wide level that we require, and I forget the precise number now. It's a TOEFL level 9 or 10, I sort of think. But it's really, I think what's more important, you need to have, the degree is in English, and you, as part of the coursework, you'll be doing a lot of verbal presentation, but even more writing. And that is high-level writing. It's not just answering a few exam questions, and those are essays. And as you go along, when you start taking the exams that make up the program, you end up writing 20, eventually 50-page papers, and then, of course, a dissertation. You need to be able to express yourself well in English. That doesn't mean that you need to be, sort of a flawless, accentless. I would be the last one to be able to insist on that as a non-native speaker here. But you need to have a good level of English proficiency when you get here, because that is just, the nature of the university as a whole. There is support for academic writing and those sort of things here, and so you can definitely, there is some variation there. Things can be, you can improve yourself here. People will help you. There is lots of support at Brown, but yeah, you need to have a pretty good level of English coming here.
Thank you. So moving on to the next theme of the question, because hopefully by now we've all convinced you that you need to apply to the Joukowsky Institute. But how exactly do you apply? So we have the different application elements. We have the statement of the documents. So one question is, overall, and this is actually a question from the chat, how specific is a certain area of research focus? How specific does that need to be for a good applicant in the graduate program? And this person says, for example, I know I want to study the ancient Near East or possibly South Asia, but I don't have a specific focus beyond that right now. So should students come to the department or apply with a specific goal in mind, so much so that they even know what their dissertation topic and faculty member advisor should be?
So yeah, basically, unlike, as we said before, unlike programs like in Europe, for example, you do not have to have a specific dissertation topic to actually apply to. In fact, it's not a good idea to start or to send us a dissertation topic, because as we've said, the program is broad, because you'll have 3 years of courses, you'll interact with a number of people. You're always, it would be fine, okay, and perhaps also a good idea to indicate interests in terms of regions, in terms of themes, in terms of theoretical perspectives, or in terms of periods, and perhaps also people you would like to work more with. But again, remember that this may change because you'll be exposed to a whole series of ideas and courses and projects that may actually shape your final decision about dissertation. So to sum up, yes, do express an interest. You don't have to have a very, very specific topic in mind, but if you have an idea in terms of broader focus, of course, put it on dissertation. It will always be good for us to see and talk to you about. But don't prepare a very detailed dissertation prospectus. That's part of your education here and will help you shape that, you know, in the years you're going to be here.
And Peter, I think, or no, Candace, you had wanted to say something?
I know, I think that Yannis answered that very well. We like to see interest. We like to see enthusiasm for places, for ideas. But you're not tied down yet.
Let me then just, well, again, so, you know, totally agree with that point, but as Yannis explained it, and I think it is, you know, even if you have sort of some specific interest, be open or be aware that, you know, the first sort of part of the program will take you in all those different directions, and that can work both ways. Either you can change your mind, as Yannis was suggesting, but perhaps actually you might also stick to your guns and sort of continue sort of on your original interest, but then at least that will be a sort of a more widely informed and better supported decision, and sort of might have sort of added to your interest. But you're definitely sort of, you know, well, definitely sort of, it's really not a great idea to come in with the research questions sort of with all the various bullet points already lined out and expect that on day one of the program you would be working on those. That's not how it works.
Just a little bit just from my application process. So in my personal statement, I came in wanting to basically deepen what I had started in my master's program, which was sort of using like analytical and, you know, spatial statistics to look at the spread of Christianity through the Eastern Mediterranean. But my idea was only that specific because I had done this master's program. And I will say that my mind has radically changed since I got here, almost immediately upon my arrival here. So by no means do you have to have your mind very made up on what you want to do. I think like the faculty were just saying, you know, broad research themes, sort of broad questions that you're interested in asking, that kind of thing is really what you want to focus on in your personal statement or statement purpose. So in terms of the application components, or Aaron, did you want to jump in too?
Oh, I was just going to say that kind of like you when I was putting together my statement and having to tailor it for each specific program and institution I was applying to, I was like you kind of focusing on topics that I had researched in, but also just topics that had come up and questions I had, and then kind of tweaking the statement of purpose and the application as to like how being at this institution and working with like these specific faculty members, plural, could help answer those questions, even if it was for my own personal edification. But that was it.
Great, perfect. So yeah, in terms of the application components, there's the statement of purpose, and then there's also a writing sample. So maybe, Peter, you could talk about what exactly you look for in a writing sample, what kinds of things applicants submit, whether it's a paper from like an undergraduate project or a part of a master's thesis. Talk a little bit more about the writing sample. You're muted.
There I go again, yes. The purpose of the writing sample is, you know, perhaps the obvious thing to say is, but still, I think it needs saying, that we get a good, direct, straight impression of how you can write. Writing, you know, in the end, sort of all this goes towards a doctoral dissertation, which is a really hefty piece of work that you have to write. You'll be doing a lot of writing. And so, and that's where undergraduate degrees come in as well, that should have prepared you, and or school before that, where you've learned to sort of to write. And so the ability to write is an important element that we look at. And the writing sample is important to to give us an idea. So if you would have, and therefore we would much more prefer to read, to become concrete, we would much more prefer to read a paper that you wrote for a class or as part of your previous degree than a publication that you participated in and that perhaps has, comes out of fieldwork that you've been doing, but that has 5 authors. It's totally unclear who has written, who has what. And that's not to say that the publication is unimportant. We totally appreciate that if you had, through work that you've been doing or a museum that you've been involved in a publication, but that testifies to very different abilities. That's about to do your collaboration, your passion, involvement, and so on. You're really, an individually written paper is where you can showcase how well you can write, and much less in a published one.
And I just want to chime in here as well. I feel like it does not quite, I mean, it does, but matter the topic of the paper, because as I was applying, I was actually applying from an art historical master's program. So most of the most recent things, unless they wanted to read about the Carolingian polyptych paper I wrote in undergrad, which was like 6 to 10 years earlier. But I actually had submitted a paper that was basically art historical in notes in topic and structure. So I think just showing that in your writing, you have the ability to think and write critically, pay attention to details, be coherent in your discussions and your thesis statements. I think that is the most important thing.
Great. Maybe Yannis, you can field this question about are prospective applicants expected to make contact with faculty members prior to applying?
Yes, I know that many of you do. I know many of our candidates do that. And I've received myself lots of messages in the past few months about prospective people. We do not discourage you from doing so, especially if you want to discuss something that's very specific to the research interest of a faculty member, because you may have already a specific idea and you want to find out whether that person can support that idea, looking forward, going down, your graduate program. So feel free to don't get discouraged if you don't get a response, especially immediately, because we are extremely busy. Our priority, of course, is the program and the graduate and graduate students here. But I think most of us, if not all of us, do respond and either direct you to resources that are already available on our websites, either the institute or the university, or give you specific responses in relation to your specific question about research interest. So if you are to do that, make sure you have something specific to discuss, and you've also done your work. You've actually learned a bit about the interest of the faculty person. So it's no point of me, getting in touch with me and saying, can you supervise a PhD on ancient China? Because I cannot. And you should have known that because you should have looked at the website. And the same applies to all of us. So we are very happy to respond to questions, but a lot of what you're often asking can actually be found resources already online. And also it's a good idea to actually direct an email to the broader institute address, which is looked after by our support team and our colleagues who support us in administration, and they can actually give you lots of specific information, sometimes better and perhaps more valid than some faculty members can, because they may not necessarily keep up with all the changes in terms of practicalities and administration and the specifics of applying. So that's a very kind of, I guess, a complicated answer, but I hope I answered it. Yeah.
I think I could also just answer that, this webinar and the one that we did last week, that I hope these go to some, to a large degree, may answer those general questions that Yannis just mentioned. You don't have to sort of write that. Also, there's on our website, because we are aware that it can be confusing between information on our website, perhaps courses that are with different departments, the graduate school, how all that features. So there's now a new section on our website. If you just go to the homepage and in the chat, the URLs have now been posted there. Go there, and there's frequently asked questions, and I think sort of a lot of these sort of more general aspects and will be on there, and those questions help you to find your way around a lot of online information.
So these have been really great questions, and just to continue it, could we talk about how to go about getting references, what you should ask of the person doing the reference for you? Who are appropriate people to ask? Because I'm sure you can't ask your grandmother, though I'm sure it would be a glowing reference. And can we start that off with Yannis? And you're muted.
So yes, references are important. It is one component in the whole portfolio, in the whole application. So I think you have to kind of remember that we take into consideration the whole file that includes the references. But references are important, especially from people who know you as, academically, through your studies or through your work and experience. So people who, some of your mentors and teachers in the graduate years, it's good to have, an indication of what do they think of you as a student and as somebody who has the ability to go on and do graduate studies and research. People who you have worked with in other environments, for example, a museum director, a museum curator, or a research supervisor in a project outside your academic studies. They will comment on other things. They will comment on your ability, your enthusiasm, or your ability to carry out research tasks, or your ability to communicate perhaps with others, fellow researchers, or the public. These things are important. Now, one point that I have it's actually directed mostly to people who come from outside the US system, and I think it's important. Very often we see references from colleagues in other parts of the world outside the US that are extremely brief or are extremely generic, that are written pro forma for every undergraduate student they have taught. It's less common now, but it used to be pretty common from some European and other contexts. It's important to explain to them that you need something specific, and that has to be a bit descriptive, and not just a couple of sentences about you and how nice person you are or a good student you were. So there is a cultural difference here in terms of different academic systems, that some systems pay more emphasis on reference than others, and the US system does pay emphasis on letters. So it's important to explain to your letter writers that it is for this specific US university, and if you can make something that is substantive, I would appreciate. If not, please let me know and I can ask other people.
Great, thank you. We have a couple follow-up questions in the chat just about writing samples, whether it's okay or expected to write something original for a writing sample, or whether revising something that you wrote in undergraduate is okay to do. Maybe Candace, do you want to answer that?
Excuse me. I think that those proposed options are totally fine. You should feel free to revise something. If you do so and you have someone who will read it for you, do that. Have them read it before you send it in, even if it's just to look for typos and things. But you certainly don't have to submit something that's come out of a specific course. If you have moved on since and you think you can improve on the papers that you have written or have lying around, please do so.
And then just moving on to another follow-up question, which is a little bit off topic, but I think it's still relevant. We have a question about a student, a fourth year PhD student, who is actually interested in perhaps transferring over to this program from his PhD program that is currently in Algeria.
Yeah, sure, I can take that. I think, because I was looking at that, I think that's actually a great example of the sort of specific and very relevant question that somebody would like to discuss directly with us. And I think, so rather than discussing it here in front of the whole webinar, I think this is just the sort of where the best advice is: get in touch. But the sort of I think the starting point for that discussion would then be, as I sort of said earlier in this webinar, that in principle, everybody's admitted to go through the same program. And so with somebody, you know, having a master's degree or coming right out of undergraduate is the same. So somebody who has already completed a couple of years of a PhD program, it depends on the sort of nature of that PhD program. But our initial starting point would not be, I think, that we'll start, oh no, you can start in year 2 or year 3 or so on. But you know, again, I don't know. I'm now speaking for myself, because that's something which my colleagues and we would collectively have to consider. I see time is getting close. I would like to answer, if I can, the question about the average GPA, not so much about the GPA, but really sort of related to it. The question about average GPA is hard to answer. Sort of, that's not, we don't look at that in that sense. You know, it doesn't go by numbers. But what I'd like to emphasize is that Brown has, and Joukowsky Institute, no, not entirely Brown, but certainly Joukowsky Institute, we do not longer accept GRE scores. We don't ask for them. We don't even accept them. You cannot upload them, even if you'd want to, if you should have them for some reason. That's sort of more a question targeted, or an answer targeted at the US based potential applicants here. But I think that's an important point which I would like to get in here. Thank you.
So I think that actually winds up the time that we have, but I want to thank every single member of the Council of Discussers, and also all of the participants who were able to come in and stay through, or just hopped in later and then hopped out. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for your insight. And I hope that has been helpful for everybody.
Yeah, and I would like to thank Liza and Aaron for you asking the questions, combining the questions, and adding your own insights, you know, that are sort of really adding a really important perspective for everybody. And so thanks to everybody for your interest, and hope that it helps, and that we will be seeing applications from quite a few of you. Thank you.